Good day, everyone. Today in this class, we'll be looking at reproductive behaviors in organisms. Reproductive behaviors in organisms. And by reproductive behavior, we mean courtship behavior. Now, courtship behavior consists of instinctive behaviors animals make in response to external stimulus in animals. In simple language, this is the behavior that comes before mating and reproduction in animals. And there are usually sequences for this kind of behavior. Each step of this behavior acts as a stimulus for the next stage. Alright, so when we say reproductive behavior, we mean the patterns of behavior that comes before mating. Now, the importance of courtship behaviors in animal and in reproduction is that it helps to bring the male and the female animals together, and it also prepares the male and female for possible mating. And one of the things it also does is that it stimulates the laying of eggs and the production of sperm. Alright, we'll be looking at various forms of courtship behavior in animals. There are various forms, and these forms include pairing, display, territoriality, and seasonal migration. And we'll start looking at them one by one, and we'll look at some organisms that exhibit some of these courtship behaviors. Alright, the first one we will look at is pairing. Now, pairing involves two animals, especially the male and the female. And what happens here is that there is a separation of the animals from others in a group. And when they separate, they form a mating pair. So mark the key word, separation and mating pair. So in other words, this is the type of courtship that leads to a compatible male and female pairing up to mate. Now, another thing you must take note of is that this pairing may be brief. It could just be for the purpose of mating, and it could also last for a long time. So don't forget that the key word here is separation. So these two animals, usually the male and the female, separate themselves from others in a group, and then they form a mating pair. And like I said before, it could be brief and it could last for a lifetime. Alright, we'll be looking at some animals that exhibit pairing. We'll be looking at some of them one by one. And in today's class, we'll look at three organisms that exhibit pairing. The first we'll look at is the winged termite. Now, there is usually a breeding season for the winged termite. And in this breeding season, what happens is that usually the male and the female pair up. Now, when they pair up, they fly out to form a new colony. Now, remember that when we were defining pairing, we said that there is usually a separation. So these two organisms, the male and the female, they fly out and they form a new colony. Now, when they land in the new area, what happens is that the male mounts on the female. When this mounting happens, he mates with her, and fertilized eggs will be laid. Now, when this happens, eventually the male termite becomes the king, like you can see in the picture, and the female termite becomes the queen in this new colony. And of course, you know that the offsprings that they produce will form other castes in the colony. Of course, these castes include the worker, the soldier, and other members of the colony. So, like we defined pairing to be, there is a separation here. When first of all, there is a pairing up here between the male and the female, and then there is a separation, and then a new colony is formed. Now, the second organism we'll be looking at is the fish. So pairing also happens in the fish. So during the breeding season, here too there's a breeding season. What happens is that the male fish picks a female as a partner, and then when they come together as a partner, they leave. There is that separation happens again, and then they swim together to a quiet portion of the river. So I hope you are taking note of the separation again. And then the male stimulates the female to lay eggs. And once this female lays eggs, the male releases sperms on the egg for external fertilization to take place. So here again, we are seeing another organism exhibiting pairing. And like we also saw in the previous organism, they left a particular group and they formed a mating pair, and then that separation happened, and then a new colony is formed, and then fertilization happens. Of course, the goal of everything we are talking about is that reproduction eventually happens. And once they pair up, they reproduce, they mate, and then they reproduce. All right. The third organism, very important, is the toad. So pairing also happens in the toad. Now, during the breeding season, the male goes to a pond. Now, once it goes to this pond, it starts to croak. Now, that croaking sound attracts and even excites the female. So both the attraction and the excitation is what the croaking sound does. Take note of that, because it could come up as an exam question. Now, when the female comes close, the male mounts on the back of the female, as you can see in the diagram. The male mounts on the back of the female, and then this female carries this male on the back for 2 to 3 days. 2 to 3 days. Now, during this period, the female will lay her eggs in a shallow water. And when the female lays eggs in this shallow water, the male pours sperm over the eggs. And of course, we know that when something like this happens, the kind of fertilization that happens is an external fertilization. All right. So again, we are seeing pairing, and we are seeing again that these two organisms, the male and the female, leave a particular group. Of course, in this case, the male leaves first and does the croaking, and then it attracts the female, who is going to become the mating pair. And then once the female comes, that mounting on the back happens, and the female carries it for 2 to 3 days. And then once she lays her eggs in the shallow water, take note, it's a shallow water, and the male pours the sperm over the eggs for external fertilization to take place. Now, you must also understand that there are several other organisms that pairing occurs in, that takes pairing as a means of reproductive behavior. Now, those organisms include human beings. Of course, male and female, after they have attained sexual maturity, comes together as husband or wife, and then they form sexual partners, they live together, mate, and they reproduce. And there are other organisms. I will leave you to study that on your own, the birds and the lizards. And in the next class, we'll be looking at a different kind of reproductive behavior. We'll be looking at the display as a reproductive behavior, and we'll be seeing what it is. Now, remember again that in pairing, a separation happens, and once the separation happens, the mating takes place, and then reproduction happens. Thank you very much for being a part of this class. It was wonderful having you here again. Thank you, and stay safe.